gentlemen, how we doing? Hey, a little bit more. How are we doing tonight, guys? That's what I like to hear. So you guys are here to talk to me, right? Oh, wait. Are you sure? Okay. All right. Guys, I think without further ado, and with an amazing introduction, if we can bring in our good friend, Tobin Bell. Good to see you, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for coming here today. It's lovely to be in Grand Rapids.
So, Mr. Bell, we were talking earlier off stage that this is a little bit of a weather shock, huh?
I was raised in Massachusetts, so I'm used to the cold, but I flew in here from Southern California, which is vacation heaven, you know. But I lived in New York for 39 years, so New York gets it pretty hard too.
Absolutely.
So, it's brisk out there.
If anything else, right? It's a little early in the season for it. So one of the things I would like to ask, and I think is on a lot of people's minds if they haven't seen any Q&As with you or anything like that, what is your favorite trap from Saw?
That's a question that gets answered, asked me all the time, and I'm always, they change in my head. The one that I've been thinking about a lot lately is the one that the FBI agent is in. It's a box of water, and he's in it because I was there that day and watching what the actor went through. If you remember the scene, I think it was in Saw 5 or 6. FBI agent Strom is in this wakes up in this box of water, fills with water, and he has to use a pen to perform a tracheotomy so he can breathe. But it was terrifying for the actor because he had to trust the special effects guys and the stunt people that they were not going to leave him underwater too long, so it was pretty cool to watch my friend terrorized.
So with some of the traps that were on set and things like that, did they give you more of an idea of what they were going to do as they were making them? Or were you involved in it at all in the making of any of this? As far as the trap designs and things like that?
No, I was not involved with trap designs. There are incredible people who, with twisted minds, that do that sort of thing. I was involved with 2 of them. One was with Cecil, who I think that's Saw 4 or 5, where Cecil is in this trap. And when they set the trap up and they sat Cecil in, I said, I want to pick it up and move it, so how do I do that? And that was hands-on. By the way, I don't know if you realize this, but John Kramer is not, aka Jigsaw, is not there physically when a lot of this takes place in other locations. He's responsible for setting it up, but he's not there. But I was there with Cecil, and in Jigsaw, the most recent edition, I have a long scene at the very end of the film, and I was there almost a week early before we shot that scene, and John Kramer built that machine, and during the course of the scene, I have to take the machine apart because there's something I want to do with it. So during the week I was there, I sat with the designer and we designed the machine. And he built it during that week, and then I went there day after day and I took it apart and I put it back together. And I took it apart and I put it back together because I wanted to be able to do the scene without even looking at the machine. You know, I wanted to be able to throw it away. And I didn't want it to seem like, oh, how does that work? And what's my next move? What's the next thing? Acting is doing. You might think it's about the words or the lines or whatever. But the same as you're always doing something. You either got your car keys in your hand or you still put that half a sandwich you didn't finish for lunch in your pocket. So you're always doing so. I got to go to the restroom. You got always, what's the next thing to do? That's what acting is. So I wanted to make it seem like that machine, that John built it, and he doesn't even have to look at it to take it apart. That's how familiar he is with it. He is by design a mechanical engineer. That's what his training is, and an architect.
So for you, it was a way to envelop yourself more into that character and not seem like you couldn't actually do it. You wanted to be able to be John for that moment, if not longer.
No question about it, because very often when you see something going on in a scene, on a screen, if it's being done properly, see, I'm talking to two people in that scene, one of whom's over here chained to a wall, the other one's over here chained to a wall. I wanted to be talking to them and taking this machine apart at the same time. There's a lot to do, there's a lot of dialogue and everything, so I didn't want to have to think about the machine. And it was a complicated machine. And all you were left with at the end, when I finished taking this machine apart, were two Y-shaped uprights. And in those two Y-shaped uprights, I placed a shotgun.
So with Saw being such a large franchise now, during the process of Saw 1, how did you go about were you approached for it? Did you audition for it? And when did you know that it was going to be, I'm going to be John, this is it, this is for me?
I sat with James Wan, the director. By the way, wow, this is nice, comfy set you got.
It is, right?
I'm liking this couch.
Keep it chill here in Grand Rapids.
Sat with James Wan, who James came here from Australia with Lee Whannell. Lee Whannell played one of the two guys in the Saw bathroom, the first Saw bathroom. And I met with, they came here with a 10-minute short film, which was the closing moments, I think, of the story. But that's how they sold the idea for the film. And
that's what they brought to the producers.
That's right.
Gotcha.
That's right. And they were just demonstrating that that if James directed it, that he could achieve a professional and quality product. And so I saw that film and I saw where their heads were at, and I sat with James, talked to James, talked a little bit about the script, and I had never worked with Danny Glover, and I had always admired his work, and it gave me an opportunity to work with Danny. I also did not anticipate, when I read the script, the last moment when, how many people have seen Saw 1? Okay, so I don't think it won't be in, but when I read, there's certain moments in film that are just become sort of quintessential moments. There's a film called Four Corners, where John Turturro throws his mother out of a window. And it comes out of nowhere, and I'm like, whoa, that's amazing. I mean, it was so convincing and well done and unexpected. So when I read the script, I didn't anticipate that last moment in Saw 1, and I thought, wow, if I don't anticipate that, because I usually, when I read scripts, I can usually, I think I know what's going to happen here. I didn't anticipate that. I thought if they shoot it well, this could be a pretty cool moment. And they did. They shot it well in one take.
One take?
Yeah, because it took them 4.5 hours to build the prosthetic on my head. And they didn't have time to rebuild that prosthetic. If I pulled that puppy off,
it was gone.
Then we had to, and the dialogue was blown as I moved toward the door, or the door closing was blown. It would have to be shot again, and because they wanted to do it all in one continuous shot. So we got it in one take, and so those were the main reasons. Plus I had a car payment. That was another reason why I did it. And no, I didn't. Yeah.
What kind of car was it?
At that point in time, geez, I was driving a 91 Bronco.
Okay.
Yeah.
Classic.
Mm-hmm. I've since given it to my son, who has a house in Woodstock, New York, and he uses it all the time.
As long as it's a 4x4, he'll be all right.
It's a 4x4.
There you go.
Yeah. Not a particularly good LA car.
Not at all. Not at all. So with the prosthetic and everything, and when you're ripping that off, and to be able to get that in one take, where did you put yourself in a mindset to be able to have not only that shock factor, but to be able to get it so on point right off the bat that they didn't have to build that prosthetic again and things like that?
It's not my job. Most of that. Mm-hmm. Most of that, cinematography, sound, theater or filmmaking is such a team effort. If one person blows it, it's blown. Yep. And the actor, if I start to think, now I do have to think about, the sound guy asked me to do this, don't tap on the table while you're talking, please. As cool as that is, it's screwing up my, or just tap on the table when nobody's speaking, or don't move in front of that light because you block the other actors, you shadow the other. So you're thinking 10 things. And then you got to remember your lines, then you got to become the character, then it has to be happening for the first time, then you have to connect with the person that you're working with, but you're also thinking about all these other technical things that need to be served. Don't get to that light switch too soon, because if you do, we're screwed. And don't close when you do close the door, don't close it too fast, close it too slow, because the lights are going to fade in the back, all of these things and then the director's coming to you and giving you some last minute instructions. James Wan, thank God, came to me after our first rehearsal of getting up off the floor, and he said, remember when you get up, he's been lying there a long time. Remember when you get up. And I said, thank you. And I added this much to what I was already doing. And you see it. The camera sees everything. So that was a great directorial tip that is reflected in the moment.
And I think for most of us, and like me included, when we see him actually stand up, and you're like, I can't believe he's been here this whole time. And that's definitely a mind F for sure. And then it was written very well, acted clearly very well, just all around an excellent movie. So when you were approached for Saw 2, how did they want to go about it? Because obviously your character is starting to get developed a little bit more in Saw 2, your backstory more in 3, obviously. Again, everyone's seen 2 and 3, correct? I'm not, yes? Okay, I don't want to blow anything for people. So with the cancer and stuff like that, was that out from Saw 1, or was that more of a Saw 2 and 3 where that came into play?
It was still, it was introduced in Saw 1.
Right.
And certain themes were introduced in Saw 1, which I kept trying to pick up on and bear out. For example, the treatment of the terminally ill by the medical community. John Kramer does not have a lot of regard and we picked that up on the scenes about the insurance company in Saw 6. I was in the Czech Republic, in Prague, doing a series for NBC when I got a call saying I was paying no attention to Saw at all. And when it opened, I was working and not paying any attention to box office numbers or anything, but when it did as well, when Saw 1 did as well as it did, and I got called to read a script for Saw 2, my first instinct was, oh good, because I had always said to James, we want to know more about what motivates this guy, what's going on in his head. That could be really compelling and interesting. And I also felt always that John Kramer, and if you just look at the physical setup of the bathroom, it's a seesaw. And John Kramer is the fulcrum of the seesaw. And when I got that script, I was like, okay, he's always been in the middle, and he's still in the middle, and wow, this is going to be cool. So when they ended up casting Donnie Wahlberg in Saw 2, Donnie and I worked for about a week on the scenes. We had 7 scenes across a table. He would go out, he'd come back in, he'd go out, come back in. We spent almost a week rewriting those scenes to give them more tension, more cat and mouse. And it all showed up in the film, which is a wonderful thing, by the way, because very often things that you do as an actor, they get chopped up, the rhythms of things get changed in post-production, and some of the beats, some of the moments are altered. Well, those scenes with Donnie, intact. And I was like, if that happens to you once in a career, it's very rewarding.
It's almost like another validation towards your acting because they decided not to chop it up, that you did that well,
right.
That they wanted to keep it.
Yeah, and you know, Donnie Wahlberg, he's got a very strong sense of truth. You know, he would say, I'm not gonna fucking say that. That's so stupid, you know. I'd say, well, what would you say? And he'd tell me. I'd say, well, let's try that. And so we would try that, and we'd shape it. And then we would go that evening in the bar and get the director who was working in the house in Saw 2. There's a whole house thing going on. He was working all day on that. He'd meet with us for an hour in this bar, and we'd say, what do you think of this? And we'd give him what we had been working on all day. And he would, he was a first-time director, so he didn't know what he could approve or could not approve, but we had a splendid on-set producer, very creative and experienced guy. And so Darren would go to this producer and say, this is what they want to say. And he'd look at it and he'd go, oh yeah, that's much better. And give it back to him. So then Darren felt okay changing it to what we wanted to do. And so Saw 2 was a really rewarding acting experience.
Almost got to flex your muscle a little bit more for the camera because you were able to collaborate with Donnie in that way and build that trust with now, like you said, a new director too.
Right. And I also got an opportunity to express in the tension of those scenes what John's concerns were, what was on his mind. You know, I don't know if you remember, but you know, I actually talk about Darwin's trip to the Galapagos and survival of the fittest. And when you drop little germs like that into a soup where the other ingredients are the kind of intensity and violence that goes on in those traps, and then all of a sudden you drop in something like, if you knew the exact moment of your own death, detective, how would that change how you live your life? And people talk about that to me all the time. They don't talk to me so much about the traps, but they talk about cherishing your life and something like that line right there, that anything that makes the viewer identify with the character or makes the viewer think about themselves and how they feel about a particular issue. Because horror was always the weak sister of the film community, you know, the weak genre.
It's almost ostracized more than anything else.
Because horror films were all about the scares. They were all about the scares, the guy outside the screen door at night, you know, and with the knife in his hand and all that. It's all about the scares. You can accomplish as much in a horror film as you can in any other film, whether it's romantic comedy or historical drama or period piece. You just have to have the writing.
Right.
It all comes down to the writing. So I think the reason Saw was as successful as it has been is because there's another layer in it. It's not just all about, I mean, incredible special effects, yes. Incredible design, set design, yes, and directors and producers and all of that stuff. After all, it's a horror film, so you want to be scared. So the balance between intellectual, philosophical concepts, but still keeping it a horror film, is a delicate one, and has been the most rewarding aspect of it for me, has been how to create that balance.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. You know, when you're, like you said, when you have that multi-layer and people can start picking up on those things, it's really gratifying. So you were talking about how you wanted people to cherish their lives for what had happened to them. Do you believe when you recruited, or John recruited Amanda, do you feel like maybe she stuck with that, or do you think she kind of deviated from John's plan?
No, she did deviate from John's plan. By the way, this was called the Jigsaw Killer on the program. Something about, they had a title for this.
Yeah, it was
something the Jigsaw. John doesn't kill people.
Correct.
So it always kind of rubs me a little, I understand it, but rubs me a little the wrong way. That's not his thing, and people 99.9% have. Now sometimes the chance that they're given is slim, but he always gives a chance, and he doesn't lie. You know, he tells the truth, and whether you agree with him or not. And that's one of the best parts of doing this is people say, well, do you think he's a bad guy? I mean, how do you feel about it? Do you think he's a bad guy? Do you think he's a good guy? And you say, you know, that's up to you. You know, what do you think? You know, because if you can make the viewer go, wow, I really get where that, but I get where he's coming from. I would, the most interesting bad guys are the ones who you can identify with in some way. It doesn't mean you do what they do, but you say, oh, I get that. I get how he got that way. And bad guys should not, often do not, in the world. Richard III, in Shakespeare, doesn't think of himself as a bad guy. He thinks of himself as someone who's been cast aside, who's been left out, who's unattractive. And very often people who take that road are compensating for something. And so I never think of John. I try to think of why he does what he does and what motivates him to do that. And the one thing I can say about him is that we all have things in this world that we're not pleased with. A lot of us complain about things and do nothing. John is more committed than that. He doesn't do nothing. So whether you agree with what he does or not is something else entirely. I would reference a film called Executioner's Song, based on the novel by Norman Mailer. It was a film made with Tommy Lee Jones playing Gary Gilmore, who was ultimately executed in the state of Utah. By the end of that film, because of the way Tommy plays this guy, you can identify with Gary Gilmore's soul. You know why his mother loved him. And if you can create that, because we all have good and bad in us.
There's always that gray area.
Yeah, so if you can, and that would be part of making an audience think. Mm-hmm. We need to think and use our brains more, and that's one of the wonderful things about Saw fans and horror fans in general. They're very smart, very intelligent, and really, really love the genre.
Absolutely. I have taken up a lot of my time with Tobin. I want to go ahead, if you guys want to ask questions, please feel free. There's a microphone right up here. Don't be shy. Please feel free. Now, Tobin, you obviously work on other things as well. You have Flash and Mississippi Burning. How with voice acting, because that's a little bit newer for you, correct?
Well, I've been doing voice acting for a long time, okay. But I'm often out of town or too busy, and when they ask me to come do a season of The Flash, I love those writers. The guys who write The Flash are very devoted to character and relationship, and they don't just sit on their laurels and say, oh, well, this is action or it's animation, so we don't really have to have good relationships between the characters, but they don't think that. They write very strong characters, and so, I was having dinner one night with my son and a friend of his. They were in college in LA at USC. And his friend, I was saying to my son, I said, yeah, I just got this thing today. They wanted me to play this guy in The Flash for a whole season. And the guy across the table, my son's friend, said, The Flash? Oh, wow, that's my favorite show. And I got all of this. He didn't care about Saw. He was into the Flash, and the fact that I was going to be on The Flash, I was like a star all of a sudden, and I hadn't even decided to do it. But after that dinner with this guy who was so complimentary about Flash, I was like, I got to do this show, So what's on your mind, sir?
I was wondering, can you talk a little bit about the casting